Hey, welcome everybody. You are on Talking Niagara this morning, your morning talk show for all things Niagara. It is Thursday, January 29th at 7 a.m. as normal. We're with you this morning. And hey, we've even got a comment. So Gary is saying, prayer for the people and families of the mid-air crash in DC last night. Okay. Didn't know.
That was with a helicopter, wasn't it? A plane hit a helicopter or something? Do I got the right one?
Possibly. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't looking out for that kind of news. But yeah, sad. Whenever we see anything like that, it's always sad.
Yeah, that's yeah, definitely. I think it was I'm not so sure I'm thinking of the same one, but there was a helicopter and a plane that collided. I'm wondering if that's the same one.
Black Hawk hit a plane.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. So you had something you wanted to tell Gary.
Yeah, Gary. My son, my youngest son, works for the Niagara Parks, and he was speaking to I think it was a border patrol person or something that gave him his card, and he says he asked him to be on the lookout for boats and little boats stored in and around the Niagara River. Apparently, there's a lot of cross-border human smuggling going on both sides of the border, and they're storing little boats and stuff in along the Niagara River, and they actually are shuffling people back and forth across the border, and so the guy told my son to be on the lookout for anywhere where boats were stored, because they're keeping a strong eye on the border right now, and I guess there are some people making some pretty good coin with small boats and that getting back and forth across the Niagara River, and it's being successful. They have actually got away with it a few times, and they have found in the past boats hidden in and along the Niagara River.
So we're talking about not those boats that are out on public display, but those boats that are tied up in the corners of, on the sides, hidden maybe, and in the underbush and things like that.
Yeah, pulled up by shore and there would be small craft.
Yeah, like rowing boats or small motorcraft. Yeah.
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 So they're
perhaps with an outboard attached.
It's just Gary knows that river like the back of his hand. If there's anything out there, he'll be able to spot it if he's down that way.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so we're moving to our first. Okay, hang on a minute. Let's got a couple of. Right. Dave, here's a comment. I said that I heard about Ruth Ann's house and illegal immigrants.
Ruth Ann's house?
Yeah.
Ruth Ann's mistake?
I don't know. Kip Finn is asking upper or lower river.
Well, they were eyeballing the lower river at this particular time.
Yeah.
It's probably happening anywhere along the river, but the lower river.
There's a lot of opportunities in the upper river, but also much in the lower river. And
basically from Queenston down to Niagara on the Lake seems to be the issue right now.
Gary's going to PM you, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to deal with this, right? So basically the lower river, but there's opportunities both in the upper river and the lower river once the lower river becomes calmer. From Queenston on down, probably. Yeah,
it's the easiest spot to get across, and places there are the shortest. So you see Queenston to Lewiston is not that big of a run. But they would
actually that's a better crossing point if you want than actually the upper river anyway, because much of the upper river is like is more than a mile or maybe even larger wide, isn't it?
Yeah, certain parts are wide, and it would be harder to sneak across there because you'd be spotted easier. But if you think of a really dark night on somewhere between Queenston and Niagara on the Lake, really dark, and you've got a dark boat, and everybody, and you could kind of slip in there if you could use a pretty low profile.
We're talking about, Chris, is people smugglers that are apparently active right at the moment across primarily the lower river.
Yeah, so they're on the lookout. They've already spotted a couple, but of course these things pop up all the time, and the smugglers are getting better at hiding their little boats, I guess.
Yeah.
And I knew a guy. No, I didn't happen to be there, but I knew a guy, and one of the witnesses, the guy had a Volkswagen, an old Volkswagen Beetle, and he wanted to say that it was do an insurance claim on it, claim that it was stolen. So what he did is he threw it into the lower river there around Queenston. But the problem is because it wouldn't sink because it's nearly airtight. And so the Volkswagen kept bobbing all down the river, and he was panicking. If it didn't sink, he wasn't going to get his insurance claim. It finally did, though, but I just thought that would be an amusing story to throw in there.
Yeah. Gary's saying it's hard to tell with rainbow season in full swing. Hundreds of boats on the river now. Not a lot of ice in Queenston now. Okay. Yeah. Good morning, Mike.
Yeah, with the amount of boat traffic already there and small, and they're.
But they're hiding the boats, in awkward places along the river. So that's what they're looking out for. I'm presuming they're looking at springing traps.
Yeah. On the other hand, Gary, if you want to make some good money, you can smuggle a few people over to the States.
Okay, we didn't get to this article yesterday. All right. This article by a professor, Lee Reevers, who was educated at Oxford, whose best friend, now a man of leisure, having retired from British banking industry at 51, met his future wife in his time studying at university, and he's pontificating about the changes that have happened in the university campuses, that essentially 3/4 of all people going to university now seem to be women and not men. And in the US, there's about 50% more women at university and colleges than there are men, or graduating from universities and colleges. And Canada's statistics have actually been saying that enrollment of women is a full 18% higher than men.
Yes. Basically, it's talked about the feminization of higher education, and this is a real thing. There are differences between men and women, not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically, and men and women have different tendencies when it comes to education.
Yeah.
Now, what has happened is not only are men not so much in the universities as prior to that women are outnumbering them in universities, and that's kind of a part of the reason is that young men are fed up with universities. They don't find them attractive anymore. They don't find them challenging enough, or they just don't find the whole ambiance.
I don't know about challenging enough. I think that they're looking at steering clear of universities, and this particular writer is saying he doesn't blame them, because he's finding that the women are kind of being, the universities are tending to favor women.
Yeah, and more women are getting into university. And university, of course, used to be one of the patriarchies, basically, where men meant and women didn't. Now he's one of the things he said is this is probably part of the huge drop in fertility rates. Women, of course, don't want to have children because now they have careers, but he's talking about the fabric of the university, the sort of character of universities happening, and there's a lot of academia around feminization of academia. And what happens is women have trends that are different than men. For instance, they are more likely to employ censorship, whereas men are more likely to say that bring it on, whether you like it or not. Too bad if it's offensive for, say, public speakers in the university. And women have been trending towards, well, no, we don't want somebody that's offensive. We don't want controversy. They are more likely to censor out the things that they don't like. That's one of the. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, we were talking about the fact that, for example, things like nursing was always been predominantly female, and engineering has been predominantly male. But yet those gender traits for attracting men and women to different professions are breaking down, because there are now males who are going into nursing, and there are plenty of females that are going into engineering, for example, just to take to obviously it's not just those two areas of schooling that are affected. It's a whole raft of schooling that would have been at one time seen as male domain that are all breaking down.
Yeah.
Or female domain.
But I asked this question. One of the big issues in the U.S. election recently is all the tech bros, or the programmers, which sometimes they call, who have stepped into the fray and started shelling out big time money to Trump and his campaigns, hopefully to get more favors for big tech. And they are where are the women in this? How come there's no big tech women? All of these guys are of a generation where women had equal access to the universities.
Yeah. There are big tech women, actually. There have been big tech women, but there may be not at the moment, but there were. The CEO of HP was a woman at one point.
My point is, the real innovators in big tech, Musk,
largely men,
the other one, Gates, the other guy with.
I wouldn't equate Gates. You see, again, you've got several generations, because Gates and Jobs come from a generation that's much older, much more like yourself and I, where there would have been predominantly more men going through university. You got people like Zuckerberg, who came through in the 2000s, who, again, a different era. But again, the point is now, even so, still the modern new tech people, young men coming through university, not less so of the women.
No, I don't agree with you. I thought that most of the big tech guys now, of course, Gates is one of the older ones, but
yeah.
They were of a generation where women were filling up the universities at a rapid rate, and you take anyone that's under 60, and they'll be in that situation where there was a lot of women in the universities, and that trend is continuing. But it's the places where the women go, they're more likely to be attracted to nursing. Like, as a matter of fact, my own niece, I tried to, my my oldest boy is a computer programmer.
Yeah.
And he makes very, very good money. He went down to Seattle for a few years and made a bundle of money down there. And my niece could have followed in that area because she was very, very smart. I couldn't convince her to be to go tech. She went into nursing, just like a lot of the other women. So they have a tendency to go to things that appeal somewhat to the female psyche, whereas men are still the ones most likely to go into engineering. The men are still the ones that are still going to tend to have the innovation, tech, and engineering, and all that. Where the women seem to fill up places are in the humanities and law, legal.
Well, that was interesting because when you mentioned law now, we're about to embark on our third high school student joining our firm who to do a placement. That many of our high schools do placements to for various students. So we've got now a third student who's going to be joining us in the next couple of weeks, who's going to be coming in for her morning placement.
Yeah, so basically, like the article and other articles, and unfortunately I had some stats that I didn't write down that I was going to put, but I posted this article a couple of days ago, so that so my other information on this is not available, but there is this trend towards women are putting their character on universities, and one of the things it's doing is making it unpalatable for men. Men are not only not so the feminization of the universities is this kind of like pendulum where it used to be male dominated, and then the pendulum has swung the other way and it's become female dominated, but female traits are being to show up in the way the university is run. And like I said before, you are more likely to find females accepting censorship than men are. Females are more likely to permit censorship in areas where they don't like the opinion. The females will also say that if you write a paper or take a position, you have to believe in that position to be accepted. Whereas men would rather
that's a bad.
Wait a minute. Men would rather do the debate type thing, whereas they can take a position and argue a position, but not necessarily believe in that position. Whereas the female academics will insist that that is your position. You can't argue the other way around. Or
I actually think that's a step in the wrong direction, because the whole point about many things that they would do a debate upon is that you'd have to understand a position that you didn't believe in. For example, if you were a conservative taking a liberalistic viewpoint, because the whole point about that entire thing would be that you would have to actually sit down and understand the position that you don't support.
Here's a sum up here. Basically, it says, in truth, tertiary education is increasingly becoming a matriarchal enterprise, where it was, of course, prior viewed as a patriarchal enterprise, and that it's being run by women for women in pursuit of retribution for academic patriarchy for the past. Ultimately, their own suicidal deterrent. There's only 12 more anyway. So it goes on. You find things like where women are demanding that they have partners in any project that must be women, kind of thing, and rather than rather than just take a partner that happens to be there, or a partner in a project that is of any sex or any person. They may insist on having demanding a women one, because part of the effort is to sort of expunge the institution of the male patriarchy. So they're
Part of the
pushing it
problem.
the other way.
I'm going to ask this question, Dave. Okay, so do you believe that universities are the way they are today because of the fact that if you wind the clock back 50 years, that they were mainly, probably 3/4 of people going through universities and the types of courses being studied were male dominated?
No, there was all kinds of different things being studied, of course, in the humanities, in the tech field. Of course, we know that things like engineering, things, science things, usually are more appealing to men, and the humanities are more appealing to the women. But that's not a definite thing. I brought up the fact that the big tech bros, you don't find any women there, at least not now.
But again, many of those big tech people have gone through and started their university courses, and 3/4 of them have left university without a degree.
That's right, and but many of them have. And when you find computer scientists like my oldest
Well,
boy, you will
look,
not find you won't find a equal representation of men and women,
yeah,
as
but
we will
again,
not find an equal representation of women in or men in the nursing field.
yeah, but again, and I'm talking personally about tech. Information technology. Been through it. How a lot of the reason is that people like Zuckerberg or Gates came up with an idea, and they pursued that idea rather than finishing their university careers, and the idea turned out profitable. If Facebook hadn't turned out profitable, would Zuckerberg have gone back to university? I'm not sure what the answer is, but
Well, my whole point is he was a male, and he was more likely, according to this article and others I've read, he's more likely to be that guy, whether he won or lost.
yeah, be that guy who just went out and did it. Yeah,
Yeah, the
get
point of the article is there are traits and tendencies,
yeah,
and right now the universities are beginning to develop a more feminine tendencies, and started to develop more to meet the needs or traits and traits basically of women.
well,
What characterizes women, and universities are reflecting that.
yeah. And basically, some of this, he points out, philosopher Peter Bergerson, who's saying that universities have become ideology mills that imprint a deranged set of values upon the young and impressionable minds, and that they want nothing to do with it. So he's talking about men want nothing to do with that kind of process.
Yeah, that's one of the things that are turning men away from that. And it does say that they're more likely to venture off and do their own thing rather than go the university route. And you just said about Gates and a bunch of these other guys that started in university and just left it. We know that Elon Musk came from South Africa, and he spent 2 years in Queen's University in order to demonstrate his academic wherewithal. And then as soon as he did, he became attractive to universities in the United States. I think he went to the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm not even sure that he finished anything there. He was always doing projects like PayPal or other things.
Yeah.
And but you don't find women tendency breaking down these brand new barriers, and the frontier of electronics and things like that. You don't find women in there. What you do find is men that start in university and then bail out.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that you're right that Musk didn't finish his qualifications. PayPal was an idea that came to him and others in his team that they built and left university before before they before they finished their stuff, right? So they never finished it. Again,
they never finished their stuff. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they never finished their degrees. They got they got PayPal going instead. And when you think about what PayPal was, $1 billion company, right out the gate.
Yeah, one of the things that shocked me, about 10 years ago or so, a woman professor, a prominent woman professor, and I can't remember her name or anything like that, was talking about universities and education, and she was saying that the truth is not necessarily a good thing. The truth quite may not serve society very much, and so she was really advocating for the inconvenient truths, because there were we there are certain truths you don't want you don't want a whole lot of people knowing about, because they're harmful truths, and they have a way of directing the way they think. It was quite shocking to me. She had a logical explanation for it, but she didn't. There are certain truths that they didn't want at the university. Like, for instance, a lot of the philosophy of our society, our colonial society, our patriarchal society, and stuff like that. When the truth starts to come out, and I'll use the oft-time example of slavery. There was all this academia around how Europeans went to Africa, clubbed a lot of Africans over the head, and dragged them out to the boats, and sold them in the New World. But very rarely in academia, for a long time, did you ever hear about the Africans' cooperation in the slave trade.
Yeah.
And it was very shocking to a lot of people to know the real truth about it. But that truth was withheld, because the whole point of the articles or the videos that were being made about it was to place the blame squarely on colonization and Europeans. So they quite conveniently left out a lot of the truths about the slave trade, like
the fact that the slave trade has been around for thousands
in the trade.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing so they had an agenda. They wanted to criticize the colonialization and white civilization, but they found that they couldn't really use slavery as part of this unless they censored a lot of the real truths behind slavery. And that's the kind of thing now that can't be hidden anymore. But if you go back far enough and watch videos, let's say on YouTube, about that stuff, you'll find a very, very slanted one side story of that, the inconvenient truths of African slavery and things like that. So it takes a little while to get things sorted out. So there is truth is truth, and I think that no matter whether you go to a patriarchy or a matriarchy in your universities, somewhere that pendulum's got to swing back into the middle zone. But that's not going to happen anytime soon, because as this guy says, and in his opinion, that more and more men are being put off by universities.
Well, Chris Simone says he had two older kids that at university, that was a requirement. Two younger kids that are not allowed to go to university. Not allowed. Why? Right. Okay. I've heard the same thing. Apparently, it's going to CAO and Serge Mikey. Just rumors so far. Did he not go before and sign the MOU without council's approval? Thundering Waters. Okay.
Okay. There's another issue. Yeah.
It's a different issue. Yeah. Okay. And Mike's obviously replying to that. Would that be a conflict of interest with his daughter working for the university? Is also Mona Patel's kid.
Yeah, the universities. Yeah, there's the University of Niagara Falls has become controversial, of course, and what we find is Diodati's daughter is working for the university and stuff like that. So, is there a conflict of interest here when they're making decisions involving around that? That's another issue. Maybe we could pick it up tomorrow, there, Gary.
Yeah, and here's a question that that I was essentially asking, with Karen's asking. Do you think that those women who are in universities now are fighting centuries of misogyny?
Yeah, that is implied in the article. Now,
That's
it's
true.
not my opinion, but in the article, he is suggesting there that that's part of their traits or trends to kind of claw back the centuries of misogynization. Like they can make it better if they feminize the academia of some kind. You like the idea that I only want to work with other women kind of thing.
But I think you end up with a trait that goes one way than the other. So you'll end up with we've had, and there can be no disputing this, that there have been long periods where women were not permitted in universities, or if they were in universities, it was in minor roles or minor. We can allow them into the humanities, not into engineering type of thing. And I think that is the trend is reversing now. And I'm not saying that one should go whole hog anti-men. I think that's a very bad way of going, and for men not to choose not to go to university, I think it's a bad thing. If you want to become a doctor or a lawyer, you need to go to university. You have to do the right steps to go through those courses, even if they are, dominated by women. Don't let that get in your way. Go there, do the studies that you wish to do.
I think it's a cultural thing, Karen. The culture was misogynistic. Your family was less likely to accept you to go to university. I have a friend who is Italian, and when she got accepted to university, her father refused to let her go.
Yeah.
She went on her own, but her father did not think it was a right thing to do. She had a good father and everything else, but that was not what women did. She went to university without the blessing of her father. The misogyny is a cultural thing. Like, is your father a misogynist because he feels that it's not a place for women to go to university?
And another example,
is your mother a misogynist because she doesn't think, that she thinks her son should go before her daughter? You see what I mean? The pervasiveness of misogyny, is it really misogyny or is it a cultural reaction?
Well, there's similar things, and I think that you can find a lot of immigrants from a lot of parts of the world have gone through this. My mother-in-law, back in the 40s, her teacher said to her father, "Oh, you should think about sending your daughter to school. She's really very, she's very good at what she does with the schooling, and the best thing for her future would be to go to university." And her father said, "But what good's that going to be? It's not going to help her get married."
Well, the same thing happened to my grandmother. My grandmother was a very, very intelligent woman. She lived way up in the north, and she was exceptional. She finished all her studies. As a matter of fact, they had to hold her back for a while because she was too young to go into the other classes. So the teachers in and around the area told my grandfather and my grandmother that she was an exceptional person and she should go on to higher education. And my grandfather said, "No, what good is that? we need the money. So my grandfather, what he did was he sent her to a lumber camp to be a cook, because that's what women did up there to get some extra money.
Yeah.
And that because that was their attitude there. That, like,
yeah. Oh yeah. It's the same basic thing. It's like, it's exactly the same thing as my mother-in-law experienced. She had the education, she had the knowledge, she had the skills to be able to go to school, but she was her father's no. She's just somebody's wife.
So it's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Misogyny, you call misogyny a thing as if it's a dark thread through our psyche, but this is a cultural thing, and it's in almost every culture. And the ramification, and you could say, well, okay, things have been equalized now, but the fact that women are going more and more into academia and so on and choosing careers, it's had a ramification, because part of it is a distaste towards being mothers and having children. There is no way do I want to have kids. No, the interfering is going to get in the way of my career and everything. So the birth rate has gone way, way down. And we find that a lot of women a little later in life are now really regretting that, because they had the opportunity to be a mother. Now, one of the things that women do way better than men, of course, is be mothers, right?
Yeah.
Who brings new life into the world? It's women.
Yeah.
When they devote a whole lot to their career, they assume, and in many cases, rightly so, that having a family will interfere with their career. So who's going to have the families? No one.
Yeah, exactly. I get it. Absolutely. All right. Moving. Anything else on that? Don't think we've not got any further comments on that one.
No, except the idea that it's a clawback to get back a payback for all the misogyny all the years. That is a sort of a digital yes/no sort of look at the world. Remember, our cultures developed the way they did for different reasons, and misogyny, women have taking secondary roles in academia was all part of that. And remember, in the day, and we were pushed to that basically because men were the ones that were out in the fields more. Men were the ones that went the hunting and stuff, because women took care of children and took care of the home. It was supposed to be the duo duty of a family. Mother took care of the home. She kept things good there, where the men went out to work. So those tendencies in our psychology continues that way.
Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Measles cases on the rise in southern.
I'll tell you one more thing. Hazel McCullion, Hurricane Hazel, will tell you she often told everybody that when asked about all the men that got in her way in her progress, she was of course the mayor of Mississauga for many years, and she was a pretty good hockey player too. She would tell you the biggest resistance that she ever got. Of course, she got men thinking that was not a place for women, but the biggest resistance she got was from other women.
Yeah,
other women did not feel that she should be doing what she was, and found that a lot of other women were jealous and got in her way. So the misogyny of women against women, if you like.
Yeah, and that's a big problem in many immigrant communities, like Italians, like Indians, and the like. Is that women are often treated? Why would I send my girls to university? They're just going to become, marry some guy.
And also a cultural thing, in like you'll find that women, mothers, are the ones that will get behind their sons and and promote their sons going to higher education and that kind of thing before their daughters.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Very quick thing, measles are on the rise in southern Ontario. There's been a number of cases in Haldimand and Brant County, and other areas, and which is concerning.
Is this because that there's a tendency or a fear of vaccines out there now?
Yeah, I'm wondering that because used to get when my son was vaccinated, he used to get the standard MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella, and a few other vaccinations like polio and that sort of thing. But there seems to be a lessening of those vaccinations nowadays, right?
Yeah, I once talked to a female health professional. Actually, she was a doctor of chiropractic, and she insisted to me that the vaccines were bad, and vaccines were really bad, and you shouldn't get vaccines. And I argued with her. Vaccines have saved millions of lives, particularly right now in the developing world. Without vaccines, man, you'd have a lot of very sick
Well,
people. I mean,
we've
they're already vulnerable because of their poverty.
yeah, we've eradicated smallpox because of the use of vaccines across the world, right? And we've eradicated polio because of the use of polio vaccines across the world. And the same with the standard vaccine pack that you get as a child. They've been well tested, right? A lot of them have been well tested, and that's an important thing to to note. There happens to be a lot of people now that are moving against vaccines, but I'm not so sure that's a good thing.
Well, for one thing, to be against vaccines, a blank slate against
Yeah,
vaccines is wrong. You may the suspicion behind the mRNA vaccines that came out for COVID, because they were brand new and because they had to be fast tracked and stuff like that. Of course, you're going to get a lot of suspicions that
that I understand, but you're not talking about that. You're not talking
no,
about
I'm
new
saying
vaccines
I'm
here. You're
saying
talking about
what I'm no,
yeah,
what I'm saying is you can understand that sort of some people were suspicious of that kind of vaccine, but the tendency is that vaccines as a whole are bad and people
yeah,
are not
yeah.
taking them. You can pick and choose your vaccines if you don't feel the COVID one
Well,
done is researched enough. You don't dismiss the smallpox one or the mumps one or the
yeah.
measles one.
Yeah, exactly. And you see, for example, there was a vaccine for whooping cough that when my son was born, they were looking at vaccines for whooping cough, and I looked into it. It was a brand new vaccine that the doctor was saying you should have a look at this one and think about it. And I looked into it, and the um, the risks outweighed the advantages as far as I was concerned. So it was one of these sort of things whereby there was there was a risk that there was one in like 100,000 kids could suffer. I don't remember what it was they could suffer from, but if they took this vaccine, that was the risk. If that risk had been 1 in 10 million, let's say, which was what you would got with the standard measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines, that you would have had. I would have had no problem with it, but it's because the whooping cough one was a little bit. There was more risk involved.
Look, I had whooping cough. I grew up. I had whooping cough. I had measles. I had chickenpox. I had mumps.
Yeah,
So I didn't get them. But my kids never had any of those basically,
yeah,
uh, because they were vaccinated against them. So that once you're vaccinated against them, you still are exposed to them, but your body is able to react to those things. Now the argument is that you should go out and get chickenpox, measles, and things like that because you can build up resistance to it. But do
yeah.
you really want to uh, uh, get
Well,
polio to get resistance to polio? No, you
no,
want a vaccine
yeah,
against polio. And
yeah.
what did we find in Gaza recently when the healthcare system broke down there because of the war? Kids were getting polio.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
because
Yeah.
they couldn't get their vaccines. So that's an indication that the vaccines really work, because in absence of the vaccine, and just on a short period of time, people were getting incidents of polio were spiking up.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I mean,
polio
have
is
you ever
actually,
seen anybody in our age group? You saw people who had suffered from polio before the vaccinations, and you don't see them anymore. You don't see those people with the crutches, with their legs were uh, kind of destroyed by polio, and they're
yeah.
you see people like that. When I went to school,
Well,
a few
one of
kids
my,
would have had polio, and also the adults of an earlier generation. You
yeah.
don't see them anymore. Why? Polio vaccines.
Yeah, and one of my mother's friends and clients was actually a polio victim, and she had this specialist adapted car. I was fascinated by her car, but you know, but polio is a crippling disease, and really, really, she was lucky to have that car, and she couldn't walk basically.
Yes. So vaccines are very, very important.
Yeah,
That unfortunately, there's a trend, there's a fear of this. And part of that was that British doctor who said that autism would occur more frequently if you've had vaccines. Unfortunately, that news
not
got
true.
out, and the press made heyday off of it, but they didn't do any kind of background checks or
Yeah,
bias checks on his research. Once that got into the media and got into the sort of the water cooler talk, it dropped. The tendencies was to drop vaccines altogether,
yeah.
and how and that they were no good for you, and that you could get more autism. None of that was true. There, you have much more risk of damaging yourself for the future of your life if you don't get a vaccine, because things like polio and other diseases can do quite a number on you, particularly caught later on in life.
And Karen is basically saying the reason she wears a brace is because of polio. I didn't know that, Karen. Thank you for that.
Yes, I did know
Yeah,
that. Yes,
yeah,
and back in the day, a polio vaccine, Karen may not have got polio, because
yeah.
people just don't get polio now.
And it's a fine line between Karen's day and your and my day, because we were lucky to be able to get that they developed the polio. And I was one of the recipients of the polio vaccine.
I remember the massive polio vaccines inoculations. They came to the school.
Yeah,
Came to the school, and everybody line up in the hall, and everybody's bumming because they're going to get a needle. And then they had the scratch thing on for smallpox. You'll find all people of our generation will have a little scar on one of their shoulders as a polio smallpox vaccination
yeah.
scar.
Wear it with pride.
Yeah, so then you know those things you don't see anymore, because you don't have to do that way
Well,
anymore.
in fact, actually, you don't have to do it that way, and it doesn't have that horrible impact upon the arm. Yeah, because that was the thing about the way that they did that vaccine, because it had to suck into the arm. All right. Okay. Karen asked also a very important question: are our refugees and immigrants fully vaccinated as part of the process? Immigration, we had to give vaccination records for immigrants, but I don't know whether refugees go through the same process. Would they be required to take vaccinations as part of transitioning to Canada?
Well, one of the things is it's very, very difficult. Sometimes the refugees come in, and then they lose their documents on purpose.
Yeah,
So they if the medical, I imagine they're going to get their vaccines as a matter of the process that Canada does, because first of all, we have to make sure that they're well, but also we have to make sure that they're not bringing anything in. So I imagine a regimen of vaccines would be required, but it might be up to them whether or not they get them.
yeah. And Karen was a year away from the vaccine. Yeah. Yeah.
Boy.
Right. It's really unfortunate. Why didn't they do it to kids that were older? Very good question.
No, she was a young person at the time, and
Yeah.
the polio vaccine was come out thanks to the guy named Sachs, I think his name was, and he gave it away for free. They tried to get it out as fast as they could and through the schools and stuff. And Karen's about our age, and she lived way up north, I think, at the time. So maybe that was part of the issue. It didn't get up there fast enough. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's not go back. Let's not go step back. Let's have those vaccines. Let's protect against measles. It's a horrid disease to get.
Well, Robert Kennedy, who is supposed to be the health czar in the United States coming up, he'll be appointed that. He has pointed out that he is not against vaccines, which he was just suspicious of certain vaccines, evidently.
And I get it. We see, one of the things that I wanted to do with the COVID vaccine is I wanted to have one AstraZeneca and one MMR. I wanted to be protected both ways. But the trouble is, when I got my vaccination, the AstraZeneca one was no longer available.
Yeah, it had some. There was one or two health issues that were put to it, and I predicted that in the show too. I think that the first vaccine that anyone might have had some issues with health or fears of health blowback would be the one that would be ostracized. It happened to be AstraZeneca. If it had been any of the other ones that were the first to have some health side effect or something like that, they would have been the ones ostracized. As it turned out, everyone had some little failing here and there.
Yeah.
But of course, it was blown up by the press because it sells papers.
Yeah, small failings, right? Very small failings. One in the actual people who suffered from those things. The suffering was one in hundreds of millions very often, because when you think about it, this was the biggest vaccination output across the world. 7 billion people were vaccinated, or the majority.
The issues that did come up with the vaccines
were fairly small,
were legitimate, particularly some in young men. The irony of it is that those health issues would have been multiplied if they actually got the
COVID.
COVID without the protection of the vaccines. That was the real irony of it. Well, the vaccines caused this, but if you got COVID, it would be double that. You know?
All right. Okay, moving on. Canada could avoid U.S. tariffs, but for now, with border action.
Good cop, bad cop. Good cop, bad cop. That's what's going on right now.
And this is
going to slam you. And there's negotiators saying, Howard Lutnick says, you can avoid these if you can do, so Howard Lutnick is saying, we can really avoid all this. And meanwhile, Trump's on the other side hammering. We're gonna hit him with tariffs. We're gonna hit him with tariffs. It's the good cop, bad cop thing. We're falling with line and sinker.
Yeah. And the point being is that we know, there have been these couple of articles that we reported in the last few weeks that have said that they've upping the amount of border. They're putting drones on the border now. They've put more resources to the border. Although that said, putting more people on the border means recruitment policy and training, etc., doesn't mean that they'll be on the border within weeks. They'll be, they've still got 6 months of training to do.
Well, we've talked about Howard Lutnick here a few times on the show, and way back, he predicted that Trump was going to win before he got any of these appointments, of course. Yeah. But he predicted it based on sort of more scientifically, and he beat out the other system that that didn't work this time, the 13 points or whatever. But Ludnick is the real deal. He's a guy who he's the guy whose brother got killed in the World Trade Center. His whole business got destroyed when the World Trade Center got hit by the planes, and he had to claw it back. Now, what he is saying, you can avoid these tariffs if you can stop the damn fentanyl from coming over the borders and the migrants coming over the borders. But the Canadians have come back to him and said, you know, only 1% or less than 1% of the fentanyl in the United States comes from the Canadian border. And how do we know that? We're using your own figures, your own research and studies, the U.S. Border Patrol and the U.S. The DEA and all that, has determined that less than 1% of the fentanyl going into the United States actually comes from Canada. So basically, you're asking us to do backflips for a very small, relatively small problem. So we are willing to do some backflips on it, but do remember the degree of which fentanyl comes into your country. The other thing, it was migrants coming into the country. Now that is true, but less than 1% of the migrants, illegals coming into the United States are coming from Canada. So what is it really all about? They're inflating the problem we have with Canada in order to,
and in fact,
in order to do this good cop, bad.
The fentanyl, there is 10 times or 100 times actually more fentanyl coming from the US to Canada than goes from Canada to the US. And there are, we know the migrants are actually, that's a consistent problem. And there are migrants coming from the US to Canada right now.
Now, the thing is, Lutnick says you can avoid or really reduce the amount of tariffs for now. But there's a two-phase ideology here. That, of course, the very beginning was you're going to get this tariff against you. That's how we're going to force you into being better neighbors and patrol your border better and all that, which is something we should have done on our own.
We should have done.
Premiers and other people have been asking for some time. The U.S. has been asking for it, and we've ignored them. So now we have to do it. We have to do it because the Orange Man said so. So we are doing it, and we're doing what we should have been doing all along. But the degree of the problem that is Canadian is very minor compared to the one
on the southern border. The southern border.
The other thing here is what we have to worry about is they're going to study tariffs to see which ones will actually be most beneficial for the United States. This across-the-board tariff, they're rethinking it, of course, because it's going to disrupt North America trade, basically, and that inevitably will not be good for the United States. It'd be much worse for us, but it'd be not good for the United States either. But what they're going to do is now study the tariffs and see which ones they can impose without hurting themselves so much. So what you might do now is get targeted tariffs on Canada, those targeted tariffs where the United States will not feel the pinch as much, and that
so likely
by us.
So likely our agricultural, dairy and meat products will be going across the border uninterrupted, whereas some other products might well be attracting tariffs.
Well, one of the things we did successfully the last negotiations, we did reduce the amount of protection we had on our own dairy, particularly that at Quebec, mostly the one in Quebec, and we managed to still protect it. That's not going to happen this time. They're just going to say, too bad. You cannot put those protections on Canadian dairy because we have so much dairy that we're not getting proper competition. On the other hand, though, it is pointed out that a very, very tiny amount of Canadian dairy products go into the United States. So it really doesn't affect that, but it does shut the door for American dairy products to come into Canada. that's gone. You can pretty well figure that's gone. We can't protect that anymore. So there were cultural things and areas of the economy we wanted to protect during the last negotiations. Those are gone out the door. You can pretty well figure that.
Yeah. All right. No, I think we're not going to get an imposition. Saturday, we're not going to get an imposition of 25% blanket on everything. It's going to be, I think we will get 25% on some things, but not on others.
Well, apparently, Trump likes videos. He likes videos, and that's what Lutnick and others have told him to do, Canadians to do. Make a bunch of videos, show them what you're doing. So they have these videos where the Black Hawk helicopter is landing
Patrolling,
in deep snow kind of thing, and sort of I guess Trump likes that kind of thing. That
picking up some
evidence that we are doing these things. They're making these videos and they're complying, but we are really in a situation where we have a good cop, bad cop kind of thing, and it doesn't look good when you don't have a way of your own good cop, bad cop kind of thing. When Lutnick is the good cop, Trump is the bad cop. Well, you got to do this. Basically, you got a madman there, and I'm the guy that can talk to him.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, a fake video, what you're basically saying to me is a fake video of a border patrol guy taking off in a Black Hawk helicopter and stopping a family crossing the Canadian border in the middle of Saskatchewan, in the middle of the Saskatchewan winter, is going to impress Trump a whole deal more than something, than facts and figures.
Well, sure. If you get your best looking young men and women looking like heroes, they like guns down there. So I guess we should shoot off a lot of guns.
Yeah, and you should probably kill that family of actors that are illegally crossing the border, just to impress him more, right?
Yeah. Well, I would say that one of our biggest problems, our problem at the border would be much, much less. A lot less people going into the United States from Canada if Canada had been even remotely smart on how to issue visas. What we did, we stopped issuing visas for Mexicans. So what did we do? We got plane loads of people coming up here, and when they couldn't, of Mexicans, and when they couldn't sneak across the border into Canada or the U.S., they claimed refugee status and tried some more. We took care of a backlog of visa requests from all over the place and reduced the requirement for those visas. So what we did was we had a massive amount of people that flew over here and tried to get into the United States, notably India. And we made the problem for ourselves here. We exacerbated it. If we had ordinary, reasonable visa requirements like they have in the States or what we used to have, this problem wouldn't have ballooned. Now, it was small in the beginning, and now it's like 3 times the problem it was just a few years ago, but still, we could have avoided all of that.
And this is, of course, behind what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, those boats tied up and hidden everywhere.
Yeah, there's money to be made. Maybe I don't know.
Okay, so Karen's basically saying she's off to the Family History Center.
Oh, okay.
Have a great day, Karen.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself a boat and start shuffling people across the river. If the cops come to get me, I'll throw the migrants overboard, so the cops will have to go chase them, and I'll get away.
Yeah, it's not the cops you need to be worried about. It's the
Border Patrol,
Canadian Border Services Agency, or Homeland Security.
Yeah.
They'll have you pinned against the they'll have you pinned against the floor of that boat before you can say lippity slick.
Yeah. Oh well. We could try it out. I could get a couple Americans over here and then shuffle them over the border. And if we get caught, well, they're Americans anyway. This is just a trial run, I'll tell them.
Yeah. Good for you, Dave. Good for you, Dave. try that out. Try that out, and I'm sure the CIA will love that approach, and the FBI.
Yeah, look, look, they are gun happy over there, so you're better off smuggling people from the States into Canada to make some money because the States are just too gun happy. If they find you coming over with some, but like you're going to have helicopters, howitzers, the SWAT team, that kind of thing. But coming our way, you've got a couple of guys. Hey, what you doing there, man?
Yeah. All right.
You're under arrest. Okay. Without further ado, everyone, I bid you adieu. Without further ado, and pray for peace. The Gaza thing is holding by.